I knelt on the cold tiles, my cheek burning from her slap, while Silent Night played softly in the background. My stepmother leaned down, whispering for me not to ruin Christmas, oblivious to the tiny red light blinking above us. Grandpa had installed that security camera just for peace of mind. But at 8:17 on Christmas Eve, it caught the truth. When the footage played for our lawyers later, the holiday cheer finally died. My name is Kira Dalton. I am 29 years old, a project manager who manages million-dollar budgets and navigates corporate crises for a living. But in that moment, I was just a child again, kneeling on the cold porcelain tiles of my grandfather's kitchen. The metallic tang of blood bloomed on my tongue where my tooth had cut into my inner lip. My cheek radiated a sharp, stinging heat that seemed to pulse in time with the muffled bass of the Christmas music vibrating through the wall. Outside, Silver Creek, Colorado, was performing its annual role as the picture-perfect holiday postcard. Thick, soft flakes of snow were drifting down from a velvet black sky, coating the Douglas firs and the manicured lawns in a pristine white blanket. The streetlights cast a warm, amber glow over the neighborhood, and from the driveway, our family home must have looked like a beacon of warmth and joy. The windows were glowing. The wreath on the front door was dusted with real frost. It was the kind of scene you would see on a greeting card, promising peace and goodwill to all men. Inside the kitchen, however, there was no peace. There was only the low, vibrating tension of violence. I pushed myself up, my palms slipping slightly on the slick floor. My head was spinning, not just from the physical blow, but from the sheer audacity of it. I had been slapped before, emotionally and verbally, 1,000 times in this house, but this was different. This was a physical line crossed that I thought we had left behind in the dark ages of my teenage years. Lorraine stood between me and the swinging door that led to the dining room. She was wearing a red cashmere sweater that cost more than my first car, and her pearls gleamed under the recessed lighting. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like a concerned mother figure, her head tilted slightly, her makeup flawless, but her eyes were hard, flat stones. "Don't you dare," she whispered. The volume of her voice was terrifyingly low. It was a hiss, designed to travel no further than the space between us, ensuring that the cheerful, chaotic noise of the party in the next room remained undisturbed. In the living room, my father was laughing at something, a deep, booming sound I rarely heard anymore. My two younger half-siblings were arguing over who got to open the first present from under the tree. The clinking of crystal glasses and the crooning of Bing Crosby created a wall of sound that insulated Lorraine's violence from the rest of the world. "Don't you dare go out there and make a scene," Lorraine continued. Taking a step closer, she loomed over me, smelling of expensive perfume and white wine. "You are not going to ruin Christmas for your father. You are not going to ruin it for the twins. Do you hear me? Don't ruin this." That phrase, "don't ruin Christmas," it echoed in my head, bouncing off the walls of my memory. It was the mantra of my childhood. If I cried because Lorraine forgot to pick me up from school, I was ruining the evening. If I pointed out that she had spent my college fund on a renovation, I was ruining the family dynamic. If I existed too loudly, too unhappily, or too truthfully, I was the designated destroyer of Dalton family happiness. I swallowed the lump in my throat, tasting copper. My hand was gripping my phone so hard my knuckles were white. The screen was dark, but I knew the emergency button was just a swipe away. 911. It was so simple. I could call the police. I could report a domestic assault. I could show them my bleeding lip and the red handprint that I knew was already blooming on my pale skin. But I didn't unlock the phone. The paralysis wasn't logical. It was learned. It was a muscle memory forged over 2 decades of gaslighting. If I called the police now, the music would stop. The neighbors would see the flashing lights reflecting off the snow. My father would look at me with that disappointed, weary expression, the one that said, "Why can't you just get along? Why do you have to be so difficult?" Lorraine would cry. She would tell the officers I slipped, that I was hysterical, that I had been drinking, and because she was Lorraine, the pillar of the community, and I was Kira, the spinster daughter who lived in the city and had an attitude. They might believe her. I would be the villain, again. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand, checking for blood. There was a smear of red against my skin. I looked at it. Then I looked at Lorraine. She was smiling now. A tight, victorious little quirk of the lips. She thought she had won. She thought she had successfully reset the hierarchy, putting me back in the box where I belonged, silent, compliant, and afraid. She didn't know about the ceiling. My eyes flickered upward, just for a fraction of a second. In the corner of the room, nestled between the crown molding and the top of the dark oak cabinets, was a small, sleek black dome. Grandpa Arthur had installed the new security system only 3 days ago. He had been so proud of it, showing me the app on his tablet, joking that he needed to keep an eye on his cookie jar. A tiny rhythmic red light blinked in the darkness of the lens. Blink, blink, blink. It was staring directly at us. It was staring at the spot where Lorraine had swung her arm. It was staring at me on the floor. It was staring at Lorraine's face as she hissed her threats. A jolt of electricity went through me, sharper than the slap. Lorraine hadn't noticed my glance. She was too busy preening, adjusting the cuff of her sleeve, confident that her secret was safe in the silence of the kitchen. She didn't understand technology. To her, security cameras were things that watched the front porch for package thieves, not silent witnesses inside the sanctity of the home. I didn't know if it had recorded audio. I didn't know if the angle was wide enough to catch the impact. But for the first time in my life, there was a possibility, a slim, fragile possibility, that I wasn't the only one who knew the truth. But I couldn't stay to find out. If I stayed, I would scream. If I stayed, I would shatter a wine bottle against the granite island. The rage that was rising in my chest was hot and suffocating, and I knew that if I let it out now, without proof, without a plan, I would lose. I took a breath, shaky and ragged. "I'm leaving," I said. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, hollow, detached. Lorraine blinked, surprised by my sudden composure. She had expected tears. She had expected a begging apology. "Good," she sniffed, stepping aside but still keeping a hand on the counter, blocking the path to the dining room. "Go out the back. Don't let the guests see you looking like that. I'll tell them you had a migraine. I'll tell them you had work to do. Again." "You do that?" I said. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I walked over to the coat rack by the mudroom door, my legs feeling heavy, like I was wading through deep water. I grabbed my wool coat and my car keys. I didn't put the coat on. I just clutched it to my chest like a shield. I opened the back door and the freezing air hit me like a physical blow, shocking my system. The silence of the backyard was absolute. The snow muffled everything. I stepped out, the crunch of my boots on the fresh powder sounding aggressively loud in the stillness. I walked toward the driveway where my sedan was parked under a layer of fresh snow. I didn't look back at the warm, glowing kitchen window. I didn't look back at the silhouette of the woman who had made my life a misery for 15 years. I felt a strange sense of finality settling over me. Usually, when I left these family gatherings, I left with a heavy heart, wondering what I could have done differently to make them love me. I would drive back to Denver crying, planning my apology texts. Not tonight. Tonight, the cold air felt cleansing. Tonight, the throbbing in my cheek wasn't a mark of shame. It was a receipt. It was the bill coming due. The thought was clear and absolute in my mind. This time, I am not coming back. I reached my car and fumbled with the door handle, my fingers numb. As I pulled the door open, a movement in the upper window of the house caught my peripheral vision. I paused and looked up. It was the window to the master study, the room where Grandpa Arthur spent most of his time these days, escaping the noise of the grandchildren. The curtains were drawn back. Standing there, framed by the darkness of the room behind him, was Grandpa. He looked frail. The cancer treatments earlier in the year had taken a toll on his weight, leaving his shoulders sharp under his cardigan. His silver hair was thin, but even from this distance, even through the falling snow and the dark, I could feel the intensity of his gaze. He wasn't looking at the sky. He wasn't looking at the decorations. He was looking directly at me. He stood motionless, like a sentinel. In his hand, held up slightly against the glass, was his smartphone. The glow from the screen illuminated his face from below, casting deep shadows in the hollows of his eyes and cheeks. He didn't wave. He didn't motion for me to come back inside. He just watched, his expression unreadable, devoid of the usual grandfatherly warmth. It was a look of profound, unsettling realization. I got into my car and slammed the door. Shutting out the cold in the house, I started the engine, the heater blasting to life. As I backed out of the driveway, leaving tire tracks in the virgin snow, I didn't know exactly what he had seen. But upstairs, in the quiet of the study, the notification on Arthur Dalton's phone screen was still glowing, bright and damning in the dark room. New security cam recording. Kitchen, 8:17 p.m. The file was waiting, and the silence of the night was about to be broken forever. 3 days after Christmas, the bruise on my cheek had faded to a sickly shade of yellow, easily hidden under a layer of foundation. I was back in Denver, sitting in my glass-walled office at Northline Systems, staring at 2 monitors filled with Gantt charts and panicked emails from a client in Seattle. My job title was Senior Project Manager, but in reality, I was a professional firefighter for corporate disasters. When a server migration failed or a budget hemorrhaged, they called me. I was efficient. I was calm. I could look at a tangled mess of incompetence and find the single loose thread that would unravel the knot. It was a bitter irony that I could negotiate million-dollar contracts and de-escalate screaming executives. Yet I crumbled the moment I crossed the threshold of my father's house in Silver Creek. I minimized the spreadsheet and looked out at the gray city skyline. My phone sat face down on the desk. It had been vibrating intermittently since I fled the driveway on Christmas Eve, but I hadn't answered. Not the guilt-tripping voicemails from my father, and certainly not the gaslighting texts from Lorraine. My mind drifted back, not to the slap itself, but to the long, slow road that had led us there. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow erosion, like water wearing down stone over 15 years. It started when my mother died during my junior year of high school. The house had felt like a tomb then, silent and suffocating. My father, Mark, was a man who didn't know how to be alone. He was kind but hollow, a structure that needed a support beam to stay upright. Enter Lorraine. She appeared less than a year after the funeral, armed with casseroles and a terrifyingly bright disposition. To the neighbors, to the church group, and eventually to my grieving father. She was a saint. She was the woman who stepped in to heal a broken family. To me, she was an invasive species. I was 18 when I realized my role in the new family dynamic. I was the relic of the previous administration. Lorraine wanted a fresh start, and that meant she wanted a family that was purely hers. When the twins came along, my half-siblings, who were now teenagers, I saw the shift happen in real time. They were the golden children, the proof of her successful rescue of Mark Dalton. I was just the grim reminder of the wife who came before. I did what I thought I was supposed to do. I worked harder. I became the first Dalton to go to college, paying my own way with scholarships and 3 part-time jobs, because Lorraine convinced my father that the twins needed a college fund head start, more than I needed tuition help. I didn't complain. I thought if I proved I was self-sufficient, they would respect me. I was wrong. Self-sufficiency just made me easier to exploit. I remembered the winter 4 years ago when my father's hardware store was on the brink of bankruptcy. The mortgage on the family house, the house my mother had picked out, was 3 months behind. My father didn't tell me. He was too proud. Lorraine didn't tell me. She was too busy keeping up appearances. I found out when I saw the foreclosure notice buried in a stack of mail on the counter during a visit. I had just received my first significant bonus at Northline. It was $20,000, money I had planned to use for a down payment on my own condo. Instead, I sat down with my father and wrote a check to the bank. I set up a recurring transfer to cover half the mortgage every month after that. "Thank you, Kira," my father had said, tears in his eyes. You saved us. But the narrative changed the moment it left the room. By the next Sunday dinner, the story Lorraine told the relatives wasn't that Kira had saved the house. It was that Lorraine had managed the household budget with extreme sacrifice to keep them afloat. We had to tighten our belts, she told Aunt Sarah over roast chicken, while I sat there, invisible. It was hard work, but family comes first. I opened my mouth to correct her, to say I paid for this chicken. I paid for the roof over your head. But I looked at my father. He was staring at his plate, shrinking into himself, pleading silently with me not to start a fight. Don't ruin the mood, his eyes said. Let her have this. So I swallowed the truth. I let her be the hero, and in doing so, I taught them that I was a resource, not a person. I became the invisible ATM. The exploitation wasn't always about money, it was emotional siphoning. The twins, who were decent kids at heart, but impressionable, were raised on a steady diet of Lorraine's version of reality. They were told that I was cold, that I was obsessed with my career, that I didn't visit enough because I thought I was better than them. They didn't know that Lorraine deliberately forgot to invite me to birthday parties until the day of, ensuring I couldn't make the drive in time, just so she could sigh and say, "Oh well, Kira is just too busy for us again." I was the villain in their story, so that Lorraine could be the martyr. There was one person who saw through it, though he rarely spoke up in the heat of the moment. Grandpa Arthur. My grandfather was a man of few words, a retired engineer who expressed affection through practicalities rather than hugs. After I moved to Denver, I started noticing small notifications on my banking app. $20, $50. The memo line would always be simple. Coffee on me, or buy a warm coat. I didn't need the money. I was earning a 6-figure salary. I tried to send it back once, and he called me immediately. Kira. His voice had been raspy over the line. Don't send it back. It's not about the money. It's about knowing someone in that house remembers you exist. That sentence had broken me more than any insult Lorraine ever hurled. It validated the deep, aching loneliness I carried. He knew. He saw me being erased, and in his quiet, limited way, he was trying to write me back into existence. But even Grandpa didn't know the extent of it. He didn't know about the credit card incident 2 years ago. Lorraine had cornered me in the laundry room during Thanksgiving. She was crying, actual wet tears, shaking a bill from a credit card company. She had racked up $5,000 in debt buying essential things for the twins and new furniture for the living room. If Mark found out, she sobbed, it would kill him. His blood pressure was already so high. Please, Kira, she had begged, gripping my arm. You're so successful. This is nothing to you. Just help me this one time, for your father's health. I paid it. I transferred $5,000 the next morning. Feeling a sick mixture of resentment and duty, I told myself I was doing it for Dad. 2 weeks later, at a holiday party, I overheard Lorraine talking to a neighbor. She was beaming, swirling a glass of Chardonnay. Oh, yes, the new sofa is lovely. I managed to pay it off entirely with my own side savings. It feels so good to be independent and not rely on anyone, unlike some young people today who expect handouts. She saw me standing there. She looked me dead in the eye and didn't even blink. She knew I wouldn't call her out in front of the neighbors. She banked on my silence. She weaponized my desire to be a good daughter. Back in my office, I picked up a pen and tapped it against the desk. Click, click, click. Why did I stay? Why did I keep going back to Silver Creek? It was the question every friend I ever had asked me. Why do you let them treat you like that? The answer was pathetic and terrifyingly simple. I was afraid of being an orphan. My mother was dead. If I cut ties with my father, I would have no one. The fear of having no place to go on Christmas, no family emergency contact to write on medical forms, no link to my history, that fear was a cage. I tolerated the disrespect because the alternative was a void. I convinced myself that if I just gave enough, paid enough, endured enough, eventually they would see my value. Eventually, the debt would be paid, and I would be loved. I was buying stock in a company that had gone bankrupt years ago. But the slap in the kitchen had shattered that delusion. When her hand connected with my face, something snapped. It wasn't just the pain. It was the realization that there was no amount of money, no amount of silence, and no amount of sacrifice that would ever make me family to Lorraine, to her. I was a threat to be neutralized, a bank account to be drained, and a punching bag to be hidden. I looked at my reflection in the darkened computer monitor. The professional woman in the reflection looked back, tired but resolute. For years, I had been solving crises for Northline Systems. I fixed broken code. I restructured failing teams. I cut losses when a project became toxic. It was time to apply those professional skills to my personal life. I unlocked my phone. I didn't open my father's messages. Instead, I opened a new note file. I began to type, my thumbs moving rapidly. I wasn't writing a diary entry. I was creating a log. Date, December 25th. Incident, physical assault, witnesses, none visible. Potential security footage. Date, November 14th, 2 years prior. Incident, financial coercion, $5,000. False claims of repayment. Date, July 4th, 3 years prior. Incident, verbal abuse regarding marital status and career choices. I listed them all. Every memory I had suppressed to keep the peace was now data. I was building a case file. I didn't know yet what I would do with it, but the passive victim who cried in her car on the drive home was gone. I was still staring at the list when a notification popped up at the top of my screen. It wasn't a text from my father or Lorraine. Incoming call. Grandpa Arthur. My heart skipped a beat. Grandpa never called during the day. He knew I worked. He respected my time. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling slightly. Grandpa? I answered, my voice steady despite the sudden spike in my pulse. Kira. His voice came through the speaker. It sounded stronger than usual, less frail. There was a steeliness in his tone that I hadn't heard in years, reminding me that before he was a sick old man, he had been a formidable engineer who built bridges that withstood hurricanes. Are you alone? He asked. Yes, I'm at the office. I'm alone. Good, he said. I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the absolute truth. No protecting anyone, no sugarcoating. I gripped the phone tighter. Okay. Did Lorraine hit you? The question hung in the air, suspended between Denver and Silver Creek. He didn't ask if something happened. He asked specifically about the violence. I closed my eyes. I could lie. I could say it was a misunderstanding. I could say I fell. That was the old script. That was the script that kept the peace. That was the script that kept me safe in the cage. But my cheek still throbbed phantom pain. Yes, I whispered. She did. I thought so, Arthur said, and the heavy exhale that followed sounded like a gavel coming down in a courtroom. I saw the footage. I stopped breathing. He had seen it. The red blinking light wasn't just a deterrent. It was a witness. I have it, Kira, he continued, his voice dropping to a confidential rumble. I have it all, the slap, the shoving, and what she said to you, don't ruin Christmas. He spat the words out with a venom I didn't know he possessed. She thought no one was watching, but I was. The tears I hadn't shed since Christmas Eve suddenly pricked at my eyes. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. It had happened, and someone, the one person who mattered, believed me. What do you want to do, Grandpa? I asked, my voice cracking. The question isn't what I want to do, Arthur replied. It's what we are going to do, because I'll be damned if I let that woman treat my granddaughter like a stray dog, and then sit at my table eating my food. I'm looking at my will right now, Kira, and I think it's time for a rewrite. The call shifted everything. The isolation of my apartment, the cold sterility of my office. It all melted away. I wasn't just a project manager dealing with a crisis anymore. I was a partner in an operation, and for the first time in 15 years, the Dalton family dynamic was about to face a hostile takeover. To understand why the silence in that kitchen on Christmas Eve felt so heavy, heavier than just the weight of a physical blow. You have to look at the days leading up to it. The explosion didn't happen in a vacuum. The fuse had been lit 3 days earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon that was deceptively quiet. My phone had buzzed while I was in a meeting at work. It was Grandpa Arthur. He wasn't usually one for midday chats, so I stepped out to answer, fearing a medical emergency. Instead, his voice was surprisingly spry, laced with a mixture of mischief and feigned confusion. He told me he had finally succumbed to the modern world and bought a security system. He said the salesman had talked a good game about safety, but now he was staring at a box of wires and a manual printed in a font size too small for human eyes. He needed his tech-savvy granddaughter to come over and make sense of the app on his phone. When I arrived at the house that evening, the air was already thick with the pre-holiday tension that Lorraine cultivated like a prize garden. But Lorraine was out at a committee meeting for the neighborhood association, and my father was still at work, so the house was mercifully empty except for Grandpa. We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I would be bleeding on the floor 72 hours later. I downloaded the application to his smartphone and synced it with the cameras the technicians had mounted earlier that day. "Now, this one here," I said, pointing to the screen, "shows the front porch, and this feed is the back garden." Arthur squinted at the screen, tapping the glass with a calloused finger. "And the interior? They said I could see the inside." "Yes." I tapped a different icon. "Living room and kitchen. See? We're on TV." I waved at the small black dome in the corner. On the phone screen, a tiny delayed version of myself waved back. Arthur stared at the image for a long time. He didn't smile. He wasn't marveling at the technology the way he usually did with new gadgets. He was studying the angles with the precision of the engineer he used to be. "Clear picture," he muttered. "Catches everything." "It's high definition," I explained, handing the phone back to him. "You can check it from your bed if you hear a noise. It should give you peace of mind." He took the phone, but he didn't put it away. He placed it face down on the granite countertop and looked at me. It was a direct, piercing look that stripped away the casual atmosphere of our tech support session. "Kira," he said softly, "are you all right?" I blinked, instinctively straightening my spine. "I'm fine, Grandpa. Work is busy. You know how it is. End-of-year crunch." "I am not asking about work," he interrupted. "I am asking about you. At Thanksgiving, you looked like you wanted to crawl into the walls. You barely ate. You left before dessert." I looked away, focusing on a smudge on the refrigerator door. It was rare for anyone in this family to acknowledge reality. Usually, we all participated in a collective delusion that everything was perfect. Hearing him say it out loud felt dangerous, like pulling a loose thread on a sweater that could unravel the whole garment. I was tired. I lied. It was a weak lie, and we both knew it. And Lorraine has been stressed. I didn't want to get in the way. Arthur hummed, a low, dissatisfied sound in his throat. "You are not in the way. You are my granddaughter. This is your house, too." I didn't have the heart to tell him that it hadn't felt like my house for a decade. I didn't tell him that I felt like a guest who had overstayed their welcome, tolerated only because of shared DNA. "I know," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, really. Don't worry about me." He didn't look convinced, but he let it drop, or so I thought. Later that same evening, as I was packing up my bag to leave, I needed to use the restroom. I walked down the hallway toward the guest bath, which was situated right next to the open door of the study. I heard voices. Lorraine had returned early, and she was in there with Grandpa. I shouldn't have stopped. I should have kept walking, but the tone of Lorraine's voice froze me. It was that sickly sweet tone she used when she wanted something, a tone that sounded like honey mixed with arsenic. "We just have to be practical, Arthur," she was saying. "Mark is not as young as he used to be. The business has been volatile this year, and the twins, they have college coming up. They need stability, real, financial stability." I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Mark will inherit his share," Arthur's voice replied, steady and unyielding. "Of course," Lorraine soothed, But you know how hard it is to divide property. If the house and the main portfolio go to Mark, we can ensure the legacy stays intact. Kira. Well, Kira is doing so well, isn't she? She has that big job in the city. She has no dependents. She can take care of herself. She doesn't need the safety net the way the twins do. The unfairness of it burned in my throat. It wasn't about the money. I didn't care about their stocks or their bonds. It was the principle. It was the way she reduced my entire existence to, she doesn't need us, while simultaneously implying that because I was successful, I had effectively disqualified myself from the family's future. She was punishing me for the very independence she had forced me to develop. I waited for Arthur to agree. I waited for him to say what my father always said, that Kira was strong, that Kira could handle it, that the resources should go to the vulnerable ones. Instead, Arthur spoke, his voice cutting through her manipulation like a knife. "Lorraine," he said slowly, "just because a person can take care of themselves, that does not mean they do not deserve to be protected." There was a silence in the study. I could imagine the look on Lorraine's face, the tight smile failing, the flash of irritation in her eyes. "Well," she said, her voice brittle, "I was just thinking of the family, the whole family." "So am I," Arthur replied. I backed away quietly, returning to the kitchen without using the restroom. My hands were shaking. I tried to dismiss the conversation. I told myself I didn't want their money. I didn't want to be entangled in a war over assets. I just wanted to be seen. And for the first time, I realized that Grandpa Arthur actually saw me. But knowing he saw me didn't stop the train that was barreling toward us. By Christmas Eve, the atmosphere in the house had shifted from tense to suffocating. Lorraine was on a warpath for perfection. She seemed driven by a manic need to prove something to the world. Every surface in the house was covered in garlands, lights, and expensive ornaments. She had spent 3 days arranging a centerpiece for the dining table that looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine. "Don't touch that," she had snapped at me when I tried to move a candle to set down my purse. "I have it at the perfect angle for when the guests arrive." Everything was a performance. We were merely actors in Lorraine's play, titled The Perfect American Family. The neighbors were coming, the business partners were coming. There could be no cracks in the facade. My father, Mark, was vibrating with anxiety. He followed Lorraine around like a nervous shadow, fixing things before she could complain about them. When he saw me standing in the hallway, looking at the family photos on the wall, photos where I was noticeably absent or standing at the far edge, he pulled me aside. He smelled of scotch, even though it was only 4 in the afternoon. "Kira," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder to make sure Lorraine wasn't within earshot. "Please, just do me a favor tonight." "What, Dad?" I asked, tired already. "Just go along with her. She's been very high-strung about the hosting. If she says something sharp, just let it slide. For me, please? I just want a peaceful night. I don't want any drama." I looked at my father, a man who had once been my hero. Now he was begging his daughter to accept abuse so he wouldn't have to deal with his wife's temper. He wasn't asking me to be happy. He was asking me to be compliant. "I always let it slide, Dad," I said quietly. I know. You're a good girl. You're strong." He patted my shoulder awkwardly, a gesture that felt less like affection and more like a dismissal. "Just keep the peace." Keep the peace. The phrase was a gag order. I walked away from him, feeling a familiar hollowness in my chest. I went into the kitchen to get a glass of water, needing a moment of solitude before the guests arrived. Grandpa Arthur was there. He was standing on a small step stool, reaching up toward the ceiling in the corner of the room. He was messing with the new camera, the one I had helped him set up just days ago. "Grandpa?" I asked. "What are you doing? You shouldn't be climbing on things." He didn't jump. He just slowly lowered his hand and stepped down, careful with his balance. He looked at the camera, then he looked at the main preparation island in the center of the kitchen, the place where Lorraine usually held court, where she chopped vegetables and issued commands, and where she whispered her cruelest insults when no one was looking. "Just adjusting the angle," Arthur said, dusting off his hands. The view was a bit too wide. It was catching too much of the hallway. I wanted to make sure it focused on what matters. I didn't understand then. I thought he was just being fussy about his new toy. I looked up at the black lens. It was now pointed directly, aggressively. At the center of the kitchen, it created a stage, a trap. Is it working? I asked. Oh, yes, Arthur said, a strange, grim expression settling on his face as he looked at the blinking red light. It is working perfectly. It sees everything. And tonight, I have a feeling it is going to see exactly what it needs to see. He walked past me, patting my arm with a hand that felt heavy and warm. Be careful tonight, Kira, but do not be afraid. I watched him go, confused by his words. I didn't know that he had set the stage. I didn't know that while my father was begging for peace and Lorraine was preparing for a performance, Grandpa Arthur was preparing for an exposure. The trap was set. All it needed was for the villain to step into the frame. And 4 hours later, with a slap that echoed like a gunshot, she did. The snow was falling harder by the time I pulled up to the house on Christmas Eve, but the anxiety churning in my stomach had nothing to do with the road conditions. I sat in my car for 2 full minutes with the engine running, staring at the wreath on the front door, breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth. I had brought a cranberry and walnut tart, a recipe that took 3 hours to bake. It was my shield. It was my way of walking through that door, not as a combatant, but as a contributor. I wanted to prove, mostly to myself, that I could rise above the history of this house, that I could be the bigger person without becoming a doormat. I checked my makeup in the rear-view mirror, fixed my smile, and stepped out into the cold. The moment I rang the doorbell, the door swung open as if Lorraine had been waiting directly behind it. The blast of warm air smelled of cinnamon, roasting turkey, and expensive perfume. "Kira!" Lorraine shrieked, throwing her arms open wide. She was wearing a shimmering gold dress that hugged her figure, looking every bit the perfect hostess. She pulled me into a hug that was tight enough to be theatrical, but lacked any genuine warmth. To the guests mingling in the hallway behind her, cousins, neighbors, business associates of my father, it looked like a loving welcome. "Look, everyone, she made it. Our city girl actually made it." She pulled back, keeping her hands on my shoulders, her nails digging slightly into my coat. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes did a quick, critical scan of my face and then looked past me, out into the empty, snowy driveway. "Just you?" she whispered, her voice dropping so only I could hear. "Still?" I felt the familiar prick of irritation. "Merry Christmas to you too, Lorraine. I just thought maybe this year you would finally settle down." She sighed, loud enough now for Aunt Sarah to hear from the coat rack. "But I suppose a career like yours doesn't leave much room for a personal life, does it? Come in, come in. Don't let the cold in." She ushered me inside, taking the tart box from my hands. "Oh, you brought something. How sweet. I'll just put this in the back. We have so much food already. I hope we can find space for it." It was the first cut of the evening. Subtle, deniable. "We don't need your contribution." I walked into the living room, and the heat of the house hit me. It was aggressively festive. The tree was a monster of a fir, decked out in gold and silver ribbons. My father, Mark, was standing by the fireplace, holding a glass of scotch that looked mostly empty. When he saw me, his face lit up for a fraction of a second, followed immediately by a shadow of nervousness. He looked past me to see where Lorraine was before he stepped forward. "Hi, honey," he said, giving me a quick, one-armed hug. He smelled of alcohol and peppermint. "Glad you're here." "Hi, Dad. You look tired." "It's just the holidays," he muttered, taking a sip of his drink. "Your mother, Lorraine, she's worked very hard to make everything perfect. Just, let's have a good night, okay, for me?" "I'm always good, Dad," I said, but he was already drifting away, his eyes darting back to his wife as she re-entered the room. The next hour was a masterclass in erasure. My half-siblings, the twins, were the stars of the show. They were good kids, 16 years old, and they didn't know they were being used as ammunition. Lorraine paraded them around the room, showing off Leo's robotics trophy and Maya's acceptance letter to an exclusive summer art program in Italy. "We are just so proud," Lorraine beamed, clutching Leo's arm. "It was a stretch for us financially, with the economy the way it is. But Mark and I decided that we had to make the sacrifice. Education is everything." I stood by the punch bowl, gripping my glass of sparkling water. We decided. We made the sacrifice. I was the one who had written the check for the robotics camp. I was the one who had paid the deposit for the art program in Italy because Lorraine had claimed they were a little short on cash flow until the spring. I had sent the money directly to the school, $3,000, with a note telling Maya to have the time of her life. "That's wonderful, Lorraine," Uncle Steve said, clapping my father on the back. "You two are doing a hell of a job with these kids." I looked at Maya. She smiled at me, a genuine, shy smile, and I knew she didn't know. Lorraine probably told her the money came from a savings bond or some other fabrication. If I spoke up now, if I said, "Actually, I paid for that," I would look petty. I would be the jealous older sister trying to steal the spotlight. So I swallowed the truth, just like I swallowed the watered-down punch. By the time we sat down for dinner, the table was set for 20 people. I was placed at the far end, near the kitchen door. While Lorraine and my father sat at the head, Grandpa Arthur was seated opposite me. He looked sharp in his suit, but his eyes were watchful. He gave me a small nod as I sat down, a silent acknowledgement of the battlefield we were sharing. The dinner conversation flowed, steered expertly by Lorraine. She told stories that were technically true, but twisted in a way that made me the villain of my own life. "We missed you at Thanksgiving, Kira," she said loudly, projecting her voice over the roast turkey. "But we know how it is. Northline Systems needs you. It must be so stressful, having a job that consumes your entire life. I tell Mark all the time, I don't know how she does it. I could never put money before family. But Kira is just wired differently." A ripple of polite laughter went around the table. "I wasn't working, Lorraine," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I had the flu. I told you that." "Oh, right, the flu," she said, waving her hand dismissively, her tone implying that the flu was a convenient excuse for someone who simply didn't want to come home. "Well, we are just glad you could squeeze us into your schedule tonight." I looked at my father. "Defend me." I willed him. "Tell them I drove 3 hours through a snowstorm to be here. Tell them I pay half your mortgage." Mark stared resolutely at his mashed potatoes. He took a long swallow of red wine. His cowardice was physically painful to watch. He was shrinking in his chair, making himself as small as possible to avoid drawing fire. "Kira is doing very well," Grandpa Arthur said suddenly. His voice was gravelly but firm. "She is the youngest project manager in her division. That takes character." Lorraine's smile tightened at the edges. She turned her head slowly toward Arthur. "Oh, we know. Arthur, we are all very impressed by her title. But you know what they say. A career won't keep you warm at night. We just worry about her being so hard. You have to be soft to have a family, don't you think?" "I think strength is a virtue," Arthur shot back. "Dad," Lorraine said, her voice dropping into that patronizing register she used for him. "Kira is fine. She's tough. She doesn't need you to fight her battles. She's a big girl. Don't be so sensitive." She had done it again. She had dismissed his defense by labeling it as senile fussiness, and simultaneously complimented my toughness to make it seem like I didn't need love or protection. I felt a heat rising in my neck. I looked around the table. My cousins were eating, oblivious. The twins were texting under the table. My father was pouring another glass of wine. No one saw what was happening. To them, this was just banter. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to scream that the woman at the head of the table was a liar and a leech. But then I looked at Maya and Leo. They were laughing at something on Leo's phone. They looked happy. If I caused a scene, they would remember this Christmas as the one where crazy Kira ruined dinner. They would hate me, just like Lorraine wanted. So I sat on my hands. I forced myself to take a bite of the dry turkey. Just 2 more hours. I told myself, eat the food, open the presents, and leave. You never have to come back. But the universe, or perhaps just Uncle Steve, had other plans. Towards the end of the meal, the conversation turned inevitably to the economy and real estate. "Market is crazy," Uncle Steve said, leaning back and patting his stomach. "It's a good thing you held on to this place. Arthur, prime location, worth a fortune now." "It is our home," Arthur said simply. Sure, Steve chuckled. He was tipsy, his face flushed. He looked from Arthur to Mark, and then his eyes landed on me. "Well, it's a good thing Arthur has plenty of heirs to leave it to, though I guess the split is pretty obvious, huh?" The table went quiet. "What do you mean?" Lorraine asked, her voice silky. "Well," Steve gestured with his fork, "Mark and Lorraine have the twins to put through college. They need the help. And Kira here," he pointed the fork at me. "Kira is the rich city girl. She's probably got her own portfolio bigger than all of ours combined. I bet Arthur is leaving everything to the little ones, right? Kira can take care of herself." It was a joke, a crude, thoughtless joke, but it landed in the center of the table like a grenade. A few people chuckled. "That's true," someone murmured. "Kira is the success story." I looked at Lorraine. She wasn't laughing. She was looking at me, and for a second, the mask slipped completely. Her eyes were gleaming with triumph. It was a look that said, "See, everyone agrees. You don't belong. You don't need. You don't deserve." She picked up her wine glass and took a slow sip, holding my gaze over the rim. "Well," she said softly, "family supports those who need it most. That's how it works." That was it. That was the moment something inside me fractured. It wasn't about the inheritance. I would have happily signed the house over to the twins that night. It was the public consensus that I was disposable. It was the fact that my own father sat there, nodding vaguely, agreeing that I should be disinherited because I had worked hard enough to survive without them. The air in the room felt suddenly thin. I couldn't breathe. The clinking of silverware, the laughter, the Christmas music, it all became a cacophony of mockery. I pushed my chair back. The screech of the wooden legs against the floor was loud, silencing the conversation for a second. "Kira?" Grandpa asked, concern etching his face. "I need some water," I said. My voice was tight, vibrating with the effort to not scream. "I'll be right back." "Get the dessert while you're in there." "Sweetie," Lorraine called out cheerfully as I turned away. "The one you brought, let's see if it's any good." I walked out of the dining room, my heels clicking on the hardwood. I walked past the beautifully decorated tree, past the smiling photos of the happy family, and pushed through the swinging door into the kitchen. The door swung shut behind me, cutting off the noise of the party. The kitchen was quiet. The fluorescent lights were harsh compared to the candlelight of the dining room. I walked over to the sink and gripped the cold edge of the countertop. I was shaking. My entire body was vibrating with rage and hurt. I stared at the pile of dirty dishes in the sink. I needed to wash something. I needed to do something with my hands before I broke something. I turned on the faucet, the sound of rushing water filling the silence. I didn't know that the door behind me had opened. I didn't know that Lorraine had followed me, sensing that her prey was wounded and cornered. And above me, in the corner, the red light of the camera blinked. Record, record, record. The stage was set. The audience was gone. Now, the real show was about to begin. The water coming out of the tap was scalding hot, steaming against the cold porcelain of the sink. I did not turn it down. I plunged my hands into the stream, grabbing a sponge and scrubbing at a plate that was already clean. I needed the heat. I needed the physical sensation to ground me because my mind was spinning so fast I felt like I was going to vomit. Behind me, the swinging door pushed open. I didn't turn around. I knew the cadence of those footsteps. They were sharp, rhythmic, and purposeful. Then came the sound that changed the atmosphere of the room entirely. The click of the lock. Lorraine had not just entered the kitchen, she had sealed it. "You are being dramatic," she said. Her voice was no longer the high-pitched, melodic instrument she played for the guests. It was flat and hard, like slate. "Running off in the middle of a toast. It looks bad. Kira, it looks unstable." I turned off the faucet. The silence that rushed in was heavy, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the muffled bass of Jingle Bell Rock vibrating through the wall. I turned around slowly, drying my hands on a dish towel. I did not look at the floor. I looked directly at her. "It wasn't a toast," I said, my voice shaking slightly despite my best efforts to sound corporate and detached. "It was a public humiliation, and you enjoyed every second of it." Lorraine laughed, a short, breathy sound that held no humor. She leaned back against the island, crossing her arms over her gold dress. "Oh, please, Uncle Steve was just making conversation. You are so thin-skinned. It is always about you, isn't it? You have to make everything about your feelings." "He joked about Dad disinheriting me," I said, stepping forward. "He joked about me being cut out of this family, and you drank to it. You looked me in the eye and you drank to it." Lorraine rolled her eyes, inspecting her manicure. "Well, isn't it the truth? Why should you get a share of this house? You have your fancy job. You have your apartment in the city. You don't need this place. The twins need this place. Mark needs this place. This house belongs to the people who are actually building a family, not the ones who show up twice a year to judge the rest of us." The cruelty of it took my breath away. "I show up," I said, my voice rising. "I show up every time the bills are late. I show up when the mortgage is underwater. I show up when you overspend on credit cards and cry to me about protecting Dad's blood pressure." Lorraine's face darkened. The mask of the bored housewife vanished, replaced by a snarl of genuine hatred. She pushed off the island and took a step toward me. "You think writing a check makes you a daughter?" she spat. "You think throwing money at us buys you a seat at the head of the table? It doesn't. You are just a wallet. Kira, that is all you are good for. You are a cold, unlovable workaholic, just like your mother was." The mention of my mother was a line she had never crossed so openly before. The rage flared in my chest, white-hot and blinding. "I am done," I said. "I am not doing this anymore. I am not going to be your ATM and your punching bag. I am going out there, and I am telling Dad exactly how much debt you were in last year. I am telling him who paid for Maya's trip. I am telling him everything." I moved toward the door. Lorraine moved faster. She lunged, placing herself between me and the exit. Her eyes were wide, manic. "You will do no such thing." "Get out of my way, Lorraine." "You are not going to ruin this night," she hissed, stepping into my personal space. "I have worked too hard. I have put up with your sullen face and your judgment for 15 years. You are not going to destroy the image of this family just because you are jealous." "Jealous?" I laughed, a bitter, jagged sound. "I pity you. You are a fraud." That was the word that did it. Fraud. I saw the change in her eyes a split second before it happened. The control snapped. The pretense of civility shattered. Her hand moved in a blur. Crack. The sound was shockingly loud in the quiet kitchen. Her palm connected with my left cheek with a force that whipped my head to the side. It wasn't a theatrical slap. It was a blow meant to hurt, meant to punish. I stumbled back, my boots slipping on the tile. Lorraine didn't stop. She shoved me, hard, her hands slamming into my chest. I went flying backward. My lower back collided with the edge of the countertop, and then I hit the floor, my knees slamming against the hard ceramic. The pain radiated up my spine and exploded in my cheek. I tasted copper. I brought a hand up to my mouth and it came away with a smear of blood. I looked up, dazed, my vision blurring with tears of shock. Lorraine was standing over me, breathing hard. Her chest was heaving. Her perfect hair was slightly askew. She looked down at me, not with regret, but with a terrifying, cold satisfaction. She leaned down, bringing her face inches from mine, invading my space, trapping me against the cabinets. "Don't," she whispered. The word was guttural. "You hit me," I gasped. the reality of it struggling to sink in. "I said don't," she repeated, grabbing my chin and forcing me to look at her. Her fingers dug into my jaw. "Don't you dare go out there crying. Don't you dare make a scene. If you tell anyone about this, if you say one word to your father, I will tell everyone you attacked me. I will tell them you were drunk. I will tell them you are having a breakdown. Who do you think they will believe? The mother who takes care of them? Or the bitter spinster who only cares about money?" She squeezed my jaw tighter, her nails biting into my skin. "Don't ruin Christmas." She punctuated every word with a shake of my head. I stared at her, paralyzed by the sheer violence of her manipulation. I was 29 years old, a successful woman, yet in that moment, under her shadow, I was a helpless child again. I felt the shame burning hotter than the slap. I felt the crushing weight of her narrative pressing me into the floor. "Get up," she commanded. Releasing my face and standing up straight, she smoothed her dress, fixing the gold fabric as if she hadn't just assaulted me. "Fix your face, put on some lipstick, and get out of my kitchen." She turned and walked to the door, checking her reflection in the oven glass before she reached for the handle. She unlocked it, plastered a bright, fake smile on her face, and stepped back out into the party, leaving me bleeding on the floor. I sat there, trembling, the echo of her threat bouncing around my skull. "Don't ruin Christmas." I thought I was alone. I thought it was just my word against hers, a battle I would inevitably lose. But high above me, nestled in the shadows of the crown molding, the small black lens of Grandpa Arthur's new camera remained steady. The red light blinked once, twice, 3 times. It had seen the slap, it had seen the shove, and, thanks to the high-quality microphone the salesman had insisted on, it had heard every single syllable of her venomous whisper. Lorraine had just performed her greatest act of villainy, confident in her privacy. She didn't know that the curtain had been up the entire time. The drive back to Denver was a blur of white lines and red taillights. I was on Interstate 70, gripping the steering wheel so hard that my fingers had gone numb, yet I could not feel the cold. The heater in my sedan was blasting, but a deep, rattling chill had settled into the marrow of my bones. Every few miles, I would reach up and touch my left cheek. It was hot to the touch, throbbing in time with my heartbeat. The physical pain was grounding. It was the only thing telling me that what had just happened was real. For the 90 minutes it took to get back to the city, my mind was a war zone. One half of my brain, the rational, project manager half, was analyzing the event. She hit me. She shoved me. That is assault. But the other half, the part of me that had been conditioned by 15 years of living in the Dalton household, was already spinning a different narrative. Did I provoke her? Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned the money. Maybe she didn't hit me that hard. Maybe I slipped. Am I making a big deal out of nothing? This was the poison Lorraine had injected into me. It wasn't just the violence. It was the doubt. She had trained me to believe that my reaction to her abuse was the problem, not the abuse itself. By the time I unlocked the door to my apartment, I was shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice. I walked into my dark living room and didn't turn on the lights. I just sat on the floor, leaning back against the door, still in my coat. The silence of the apartment was usually a comfort, but tonight it felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Then, my phone started to buzz. I pulled it out of my pocket. The screen was bright in the darkness, flooding the room with blue light. Lorraine, 8:43 p.m. I hope you got home safely. We were so worried when you rushed off like that. We kept a plate of dessert warm for you, but I guess you were just too emotional to stay. Let's talk when you have calmed down. Don't let a moment of stress break the family apart. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. There was no apology, no mention of the slap, no acknowledgement that she had physically attacked me less than 2 hours ago. Instead, she had already rewritten the script, in her version of the evening. I was the one who was emotional and stressed. I was the one who had rushed off. She was the concerned mother figure holding a plate of warm dessert. It was masterful. If I showed this text to anyone, they would think she was a saint dealing with a difficult stepdaughter. A second text popped up immediately after. Dad, 8:45 p.m. Kira, please call. Lorraine says you left in a huff. I don't know what happened. But please, honey, Grandpa is tired. The twins are asking why you left. Don't make this a thing. Just come back tomorrow for brunch and we can smooth it over. Don't make this a thing. The words cut deeper than the slap. My father wasn't asking if I was okay. He wasn't asking why his wife had followed me into the kitchen and why I had fled with a bleeding lip. He was asking me to swallow it. He was asking me to return to the scene of the crime and eat pancakes as if nothing had happened, all to protect Grandpa's rest and the twins' innocence. I threw the phone across the room. It landed on the sofa with a soft thud. I pulled my knees to my chest and sobbed. It wasn't a pretty, cinematic cry. It was ugly, gasping heaves that hurt my ribs. I cried for the little girl who used to try so hard to be perfect. I cried for the woman who paid the bills and got slapped for it. And I cried because, even now, part of me wanted to text back and apologize just to make the pain stop. But I didn't. The next morning, I woke up with a headache that felt like a vice. The sun was streaming through the blinds, indifferent to my misery. I walked to the bathroom mirror and inspected my face. There was a faint bruise forming on my cheekbone, a yellowish-purple shadow that was tender to the touch. My inner lip was cut where my tooth had caught it. It was real. The evidence was staring back at me. I needed to tell someone. I couldn't keep this inside the echo chamber of my own head, or Lorraine's narrative would win. I picked up my phone and called Elena. Elena was the HR director at my company. She was tough, fair, and had zero tolerance for nonsense. We had bonded over late nights at the office and shared contempt for corporate politics. She was the only person I trusted to give it to me straight. Kira? She answered on the second ring. Merry Christmas. Everything okay? No, I said, my voice raspy. Can you come over, please? Elena was at my door in 20 minutes with 2 coffees and a look of fierce concern. She sat on my couch and listened while I told her everything. I told her about the dinner, the jokes about the inheritance, the kitchen, the threats, and the slap. When I finished, I sat wringing my hands, waiting for her to tell me I should probably just make peace with my family. Instead, Elena set her coffee down on the table with a deliberate clack. Kira, she said, her voice low and serious. That is domestic violence. I flinched. No, it's just my stepmother. We have issues. Stop, Elena said sharply. If a partner did that to you, slapped you, shoved you into a counter, and threatened you, what would you call it? Abuse, I whispered. Exactly. It doesn't matter that she is your stepmother. It doesn't matter that it happened in a suburban kitchen on Christmas Eve. She assaulted you, physically and verbally, and now, she pointed to my phone on the table. She is gaslighting you. Hearing the words spoken aloud by a third party was like having a bucket of ice water dumped over my head. It was shocking, but it woke me up. Gaslighting, I repeated. She is trying to make you question your reality, Elena explained. She's pretending the violence didn't happen so that if you bring it up, you look like the crazy one. It is a power move, and your father is enabling it. Elena stood up and paced the room. You need to document this. You are a project manager, right? Manage this. Write down every text. Write down exactly what happened in that kitchen while it is fresh in your memory. Dates, times, quotes. Do not let them blur the lines. After Elena left, I took her advice. I opened my laptop and started a new document. I transcribed the texts from Lorraine and my father word for word. I described the smell of Lorraine's perfume as she leaned over me. I described the coldness of the floor. As I typed, I started to see the pattern. It wasn't just last night. I began to list other incidents. The credit card debt I paid off, the times I was excluded from family photos, the passive-aggressive comments about my career. When I saw it all laid out in black and white, it wasn't a series of unfortunate misunderstandings. It was a systematic campaign to devalue me. I worked until the sun went down. My apartment grew dark again. But this time, I didn't feel helpless. I felt angry. A cold, precise anger that was far more useful than sadness. I was lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, when a thought hit me. It was so sudden and sharp it made me sit bolt upright. The ceiling. I closed my eyes and replayed the scene in the kitchen. I saw the granite island. I saw the stainless steel fridge. And I saw the corner above the pantry. The camera. Grandpa Arthur had installed the system 3 days ago. I had helped him set it up. I remembered the little red light blinking. Blink, blink, blink. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. Had it been recording? I tried to remember the specs of the system. It was motion-activated. It had a wide-angle lens. Grandpa had been so proud of the picture quality. If that camera was on, it didn't just see me washing dishes. It saw Lorraine enter. It saw her block the door. It saw the strike. It heard the threat. Don't ruin Christmas. If that footage existed, it was the silver bullet. It was the difference between he said, she said, and irrefutable proof. It was the only thing that could slice through the gaslighting. But then, doubt crept back in. What if the angle was wrong? What if the Wi-Fi was down? What if Lorraine had noticed it and deleted it? Or worse, what if Grandpa saw it and decided to delete it himself to protect the family name? I couldn't stand the uncertainty. I needed to know. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. It was almost 10 o'clock at night. I opened my text thread with Grandpa. The last message was from me, explaining how to use the Zoom function on the app. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. I couldn't just ask, "Hey, did you see Lorraine beat me up?" That was too risky. If Lorraine had his phone, or if he was in the room with her, it could blow up in my face. I typed, "Hi, Grandpa. Hope the system is working okay. Let me know if you need help with the settings." Too casual. I deleted it. "Grandpa, I need to talk to you about the kitchen camera." Too direct. I took a deep breath. I needed to know if he had seen anything. I was about to type a third version when the screen changed. The text window disappeared, replaced by the incoming call screen. Grandpa Arthur. I stared at the name, my stomach dropping to the floor. He never called this late. He was an early-to-bed, early-to-rise man. My hand trembled as I slid the icon to answer. "Hello?" I whispered into the dark. "Kira!" His voice was clear. It wasn't the shaky voice of a tired old man. It was the voice of the patriarch, the man who had built a business from nothing. But there was something else in his tone, a heaviness, a sorrow that chilled me. "Hi, Grandpa," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is everything okay?" There was a pause on the line. I could hear the faint static of a poor connection, or maybe just the distance between us. "I was just looking at my phone," Arthur said slowly. "At the notifications." My breath hitched. "There was a notification from the kitchen," he continued. "From Christmas Eve, 8:17 p.m. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears leaking out. He knew. "I didn't want to believe it," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I watched it 3 times. Kira, I watched what she did to you, and I watched you leave." He had seen it. The proof existed, and more importantly, the one person in the family whose opinion mattered wasn't buying Lorraine's lie. "Grandpa," I choked out, unable to form a complete sentence. "Don't say anything," he interrupted gently. "Not yet. Just tell me one thing. You are safe where you are?" "Yes." "Good. Stay there. We have work to do." The line went dead, but for the first time in 24 hours, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like the calm before a very necessary storm. I lowered the phone, looking at the screen. The game had changed. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the witness, and the judge had just seen the evidence. The silence on the line following Grandpa Arthur's initial confirmation was so profound, I could hear the faint, static hum of the connection between Denver and Silver Creek. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that seemed to echo the chaos in my mind. There were only 2 ways he could know. Either someone had grown a conscience and told him, which seemed impossible given the cast of characters in that house, or the technology had worked exactly as intended. "Are you going to tell me what happened in my kitchen?" Arthur asked. His voice was calm, but it possessed a gravity I had not heard in years. It wasn't the voice of the grandfather who slipped me $20 bills for coffee. It was the voice of the man who had run a construction empire for 40 years. I swallowed hard, gripping the phone. "You said you saw a notification." "I did," he replied. "I was lying in bed, unable to sleep. I decided to check the app, just to see if the twins were sneaking into the fridge or if the dog was restless. I opened the event log, and I saw it." He paused, and I heard him take a ragged breath. "I saw her corner you, Kira. I saw the way she looked at you. I saw her strike you across the face, and I saw her shove you into the cabinetry, and then I turned the volume up." I squeezed my eyes shut. The shame washed over me again, hot and prickling. "Grandpa, Don't," he cut me off, but his tone was gentle. "Do not apologize. Do not try to explain it away. I heard what she said. Don't ruin Christmas." He repeated the phrase with a slow, simmering fury. "She beat you, and then she told you that your pain was an inconvenience to her party." "I didn't want to cause a scene," I whispered, the confession tumbling out. "Dad was so stressed. The twins were having a good time. I thought if I just left—" "You did exactly what you have been trained to do," Arthur said. "You protected them, but who protects you, Kira?" The question hung in the air. It was the question I had been asking myself for a decade. "I didn't know the camera was recording," I said. "I thought it was just a live feed." "It records on motion," Arthur explained. "And thank God it does, because the moment I finished watching it, do you know what I did?" "What?" "I saved it," he said. "I am not as senile as Lorraine likes to think. I know how these things work. If she realizes that camera is there, or if she gets access to my phone, she will delete it. So I downloaded the file, I emailed it to my personal account, and then I put a copy on a USB drive and locked it in my fireproof safe." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He hadn't just watched it. He had secured it. He had treated it like evidence in a criminal investigation. The realization that he had immediately moved to protect the truth, to protect me, made my knees weak. "You have a copy?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I have 3 copies," he corrected. "That video is not going anywhere. It is the most secure thing in this house." "Why didn't you call me right away?" "I needed to calm down," Arthur admitted. "If I had called you 5 minutes after I saw it, I would have gotten in my car and driven to Denver myself, or I would have gone downstairs and thrown Lorraine out into the snow. But I am an old man, and I have learned that anger without a plan is just noise. I needed to think." He paused again, and the tone of his voice shifted. It became softer, laced with a deep, aching regret. "Kira, I need to tell you something. I have suspected for a long time that she was unkind to you. I saw the way she looked at you when she thought no one was watching. I saw the way you shrank whenever she entered a room, but I never saw her raise a hand. I thought it was just coldness. I thought it was just 2 women who didn't get along." "It was more than that," I said. "I know that now," he said. "But because you never said anything, because you always smiled and brought dessert and paid the bills, I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself I shouldn't interfere. I didn't want to be the grumpy old man causing trouble." He sighed, a heavy, rattling sound. "I was wrong. I let you down. I shouldn't have waited for a camera to tell me that my granddaughter was hurting." "You didn't know," I said, feeling a strange need to comfort him. "I should have known," he insisted. "But that ends tonight. We are done pretending." "So, what happens now?" I asked. The fear was creeping back in. "If we show this to Dad, if we show this to everyone, it's going to blow everything up. The twins won't understand. Dad will fall apart." "Kira," Arthur said, his voice sharpening, "stop thinking about them. For 1 minute, stop thinking about Mark's blood pressure or the twins' happiness. I am asking you, what do you want? You have the evidence. You have the power. Do you want to go to the police? Do you want to sue her? Do you want me to kick her out? It is your call. The shift in power was dizzying. For 15 years, I had been the reactant, never the agent. I had reacted to Lorraine's moods, reacted to my father's needs, reacted to the family's demands. Now, the patriarch of the family was handing me the reins. I thought about the police. I could file a report. I had the video. I had the text messages. I could ruin her reputation in the community forever. But then I thought about Maya and Leo. They were 16. They were innocent. If I had their mother arrested, or if this became a public scandal in our small town, they would be the collateral damage. I didn't want to destroy them. I just wanted to be free. I wanted the gaslighting to stop. I wanted acknowledgement. I don't want the police, I said slowly. Not yet. Anyway, I don't want to drag Maya and Leo through a court case. Okay, Arthur said. Then what? I want the truth, I said, the words forming clearly in my mind. I want them to see it. I want Dad to see it. I want Lorraine to sit there and watch what she did. And I want her to know that everyone knows. I want her to never be able to lie about me again. Public execution of the lie, Arthur mused. I like it. But how? I asked. If we just send them the video, she'll spin it. She'll call Dad before he watches it and tell him it's fake, or that I provoked her. Exactly, Arthur said. That is why we are not going to send it. We are going to present it. Present it? I have been thinking, Arthur said, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. You know Lorraine has been pushing me about the will. She has been whispering in my ear for months, telling me that I need to simplify my estate planning. She wants me to sign the house over to Mark now, to avoid probate. She thinks I'm teetering on the edge of dementia and that she can guide my hand. I heard her, I said, in the study. Well, I decided to take her advice, Arthur said dryly. I called my lawyer, Grayson Wells, this morning. I told him I want to call a family meeting to discuss the future of the estate, a formal dinner, everyone attends, Mark, Lorraine, the twins, and you. She will love that, I said bitterly. She'll think she's won. Precisely, Arthur said. She will think I am calling you all together to announce that I am handing over the keys to the kingdom. She will come in her best dress, expecting a coronation. She will bring champagne. And instead? Instead, Arthur said, we will have a different kind of presentation. Grayson is going to bring his laptop. He thinks we are going to review asset allocation charts, but I'm going to give him your USB drive. I gasped. You're going to play it at the dinner table? It is the only way, Arthur said firmly. We catch her when she feels safest. We catch her when she is surrounded by the people she tries to impress. We strip away the ability to lie because the evidence will be playing on a 60-inch screen while she is eating her appetizer. My heart raced at the thought. It was brutal. It was theatrical. It was exactly the kind of revenge story I would read about, but never imagined living. Can we do that? I asked. Is it legal? It is my house, Arthur said. It is my security system, and it is my dinner party. It is perfectly legal, and Grayson will be there to witness everything. If she tries to deny it, she will be lying in front of an officer of the court. When? I asked. New Year's Day, Arthur said. That gives us 3 days. 3 days for her to sweat. 3 days for you to rest and let that bruise heal. And 3 days for me to make sure the trap is set perfectly. She texted me, I told him. She told me I was emotional. She told Dad I ruined the night. Let her text, Arthur said. Don't reply, or if you do, keep it vague. Let her think she has controlled the narrative. Let her think you are cowering in Denver, afraid to come back. Silence makes people like Lorraine confident, and confidence makes them careless. Okay, I said. I can do that. Kira, Arthur said, his voice softening again. This will be hard. It will be ugly. Your father, he is not going to take this well. He has spent his whole marriage closing his eyes to who she really is. Forcing him to open them will be painful. I know, I said, but I can't protect him anymore. Not at the cost of myself. That is the right answer, Arthur said. I will call you tomorrow with the details. For now, sleep. You are not alone in this fight anymore." "Thank you, Grandpa," I whispered. "Don't thank me yet," he replied. "Thank me when she is out of our lives." He hung up, and I lowered the phone to my lap. I looked around my dark apartment. Nothing had changed physically. The furniture was the same. The streetlights outside were the same. But the world had shifted on its axis. I wasn't just the stepdaughter anymore. I was the plaintiff. And in 3 days, I was going back to Silver Creek not as a victim, but as the prosecutor. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights of Denver. A fierce calm settled over me. I thought of Lorraine's face, the smug satisfaction she wore when she told me not to ruin Christmas. She had no idea. She thought she had buried me. She didn't realize she had just planted a seed, and with Grandpa Arthur's help, it was about to grow into a forest of consequences she could never chop down. I went to my laptop and opened the document where I had been logging the abuse. I scrolled to the bottom and typed one final entry for the night. Date, December 26th. Action. The alliance is formed. The evidence is secured. The date is set. I closed the laptop with a satisfying snap. Let the game begin. The invitation arrived on December 28th, not via a casual text or a phone call, but through a calendar invite sent to my work email. The subject line was stark and uncharacteristically formal for a family gathering: Dalton Estate Planning Strategy Session. It was scheduled for 2 o'clock on New Year's Day. Grandpa Arthur was not playing games. By formalizing the meeting, he had elevated it from a family chat to a business proceeding. He knew exactly how to speak the language that would make Lorraine drool and my father sweat. I arrived at the house an hour early. As Grandpa and I had agreed during a clandestine phone call the night before, the snow from Christmas had turned into gray slush along the roads, but the sky was a piercing, cloudless blue. It felt like judgment weather, clear, cold, and unforgiving. When I parked, there was a sleek black sedan already in the driveway. I recognized the license plate. It belonged to Grayson Wells, my grandfather's attorney. Grayson was a man who looked like he had been carved out of mahogany, stiff, expensive, and unyielding. He had handled the Dalton family business for 40 years, and he had a reputation for being about as warm as a deep freeze, which made him the perfect ally for what we were about to do. I let myself in. The house was quiet. Lorraine and my father hadn't arrived yet. They were driving in from a brunch with friends. The twins were likely still asleep or glued to their gaming consoles. I found Grandpa and Grayson in the study. The room smelled of old paper and leather. Grayson was sitting behind the massive oak desk, usually Arthur's spot, typing on a laptop. Grandpa was standing by the window, looking out at the barren garden. "She is here," Arthur said without turning around. "Hi, Grandpa," I said. Stepping into the room, I looked at the lawyer. "Mr. Wells?" Grayson stopped typing and looked up over his spectacles. "Kira, it has been a long time, though I wish the circumstances were more pleasant." "You have seen it?" I asked, gesturing vaguely to the laptop. "I have," Grayson said. His voice was dry, devoid of emotion, which somehow made his assessment more terrifying. "It is a compelling piece of evidence. In a criminal court, it is assault. In a civil court, it is grounds for a restraining order. In the court of public opinion, well, it is fatal." "We are not going to court," Arthur said, turning from the window. "Not today. Today is about house cleaning." Grandpa walked over to the desk and picked up a thick document bound in blue paper, the last will and testament of Arthur Dalton. "Lorraine thinks she is coming here to receive the keys to the kingdom," Arthur said, tapping the document. "She has been dropping hints all week. She thinks I'm going to sign the deed of the house over to Mark to avoid inheritance tax. She thinks she has finally worn me down." "She is very confident," I added. "She texted me this morning." I pulled out my phone and read the message aloud. "Hi, sweetie. So glad you can make it today. Grandpa is feeling a bit fragile lately, so let's keep the mood light, okay? No need to bring up any past drama. We want him to have a peaceful start to the year." "Fragile," Arthur snorted. "She is projecting." "She is trying to silence you," Grayson observed. She is using his health as a shield to prevent you from speaking. It is a classic manipulation tactic. If you speak up, you are the one hurting the fragile old man. She makes you the aggressor. Exactly, I said. But I'm not playing that game today. Grayson nodded and turned the laptop screen toward us. Here's the strategy. We do not lead with the will. If we read the will first, she will be too focused on the money to hear anything else. We need to break her composure first. We are going to play the video, Arthur stated, before we discuss a single dollar. I will frame it as a review of recent security protocols, Grayson explained. I will tell them that before we can finalize the transfer of assets, we need to address a security breach recorded in the home. It is technically true. Domestic violence is a security breach. And the will? I asked. I have added a new clause, Arthur said. He opened the blue folder to a page flagged with a yellow sticky note. The forfeiture on conduct clause. What does that mean? Grayson answered. It essentially states that any beneficiary who is found to have committed acts of physical violence, emotional abuse, coercion, or financial manipulation against another family member, proven by material evidence, is automatically disqualified from receiving their portion of the estate. Their share goes into a blind trust managed by a third party. I stared at them. It was brilliant. It didn't just cut Lorraine out. It codified decency as a requirement for inheritance. It turned the money into a moral weapon. And since we have video evidence of violence and coercion, Arthur said, a hard glint in his eye, the moment she watches that clip, she will realize she hasn't just lost face. She has lost everything. It is a trap, I whispered. It is accountability, Arthur corrected. She set the trap herself when she raised her hand against you. I am just springing it. The sound of the front door opening downstairs cut our conversation short. Hello? Lorraine's voice floated up the stairs, high-pitched and singing. Arthur, we're here. Showtime, Grayson said, snapping the laptop shut. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had spent the last 3 days preparing for this. I had written down every insult, every slight, every time she had made me feel small. I had rehearsed my responses in the mirror. I promised myself that no matter what she said, no matter how much she tried to gaslight me or play the victim, I would not back down. Go downstairs, Arthur told me. Act normal. Let them think they are in control for 10 more minutes. I walked down the stairs, my heels sinking into the plush carpet. The living room was already buzzing. My father was hanging up coats, looking pale and anxious. The twins, Maya and Leo, were already on the sofa, arguing over a phone charger. And then there was Lorraine. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that looked like something a politician's wife would wear to a swearing-in ceremony. Her hair was sprayed into an immovable helmet of perfection. When she saw me, her smile didn't reach her eyes, but it stretched wide across her face. "Kira!" she exclaimed, coming forward to air-kiss my cheek. She smelled of the same perfume she had worn on Christmas Eve, and my stomach lurched. "I am so glad you decided to come. I was telling your father, it shows such maturity that you can put things behind you." "I wouldn't miss it," I said, stepping back out of her reach. "Good," she whispered, leaning in. "Just remember what I said. Grandpa is having a big day. Let's not upset him with any of your sensitivity." "I am here to support Grandpa," I said evenly. "That is all." "Of course," she patted my arm. "We all are. We are such a strong unit when we want to be." She turned away to fawn over Grayson Wells as he descended the stairs, followed by Arthur. "Oh, Mr. Wells," Lorraine gushed. "It is so good to see you. I hope you had a lovely holiday. We are just so ready to get everything settled for Arthur. It is such a relief to have a professional handling the transition." "Transition is a complex process, Mrs. Dalton," Grayson said, his face impassive. "Shall we move to the dining room? We have a lot of material to cover." We gathered around the long mahogany table. It felt less like a family dinner and more like a deposition. Arthur sat at the head, Grayson sat to his right, with his laptop closed in front of him. My father and Lorraine sat on one side, and I sat on the other, next to the twins. Mark looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. He kept adjusting his tie, his eyes darting between his wife and his father. He sensed the tension, but true to form, he chose to ignore it. Lorraine, however, was in her element. She folded her hands on the table, looking expectantly at the blue folder in front of Arthur. "So," she began, unable to help herself. "I assume we are here to talk about the house. Mark and I were talking, and we think it makes the most sense to keep the title in the family trust, with Mark as the primary trustee. Of course, it just simplifies the tax burden for you, Arthur." She spoke as if it were already a done deal. She spoke as if I weren't there. She spoke as if she owned the chair she was sitting in. Arthur didn't answer her immediately. He put on his reading glasses slowly, deliberately. "We will get to the assets, Lorraine," Arthur said. "But before we can discuss the future distribution of this estate, Mr. Wells has advised me that we must address a liability issue." "Liability?" Mark asked, finding his voice. "Is there a problem with the insurance?" "In a manner of speaking," Grayson said. He opened his laptop. The screen was facing away from us, toward him and Arthur, but he plugged a HDMI cable into the side. The large flat-screen television mounted on the wall behind Arthur flickered to life. It mirrored Grayson's desktop. "We have recently installed a comprehensive security system," Grayson continued, his voice smooth and professional. "As part of the estate audit, I reviewed the logs to ensure the property is secure. Unfortunately, we found a significant breach on the evening of December 24th. Lorraine frowned, looking confused but not yet alarmed. "A breach? Like a burglar?" "Not a burglar," Arthur said. "Something more damaging." "I don't understand." Lorraine laughed nervously, looking at Mark. "The alarm didn't go off. We didn't hear anything." "The cameras capture both video and audio," Grayson stated, "and the system is designed to flag aggressive motion and high-decibel disturbances." I watched Lorraine's face. The color was starting to drain from her cheeks. Her eyes flicked to me, then back to the screen. She was putting the pieces together, but her arrogance wouldn't let her believe it. She couldn't believe that her private act of dominance had been captured. "What is this about?" she demanded, her voice sharpening. "If there is a security problem, just call the company. Why are we watching TV?" "Because," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a low rumble, "this family cannot move forward until we acknowledge what happened in the past. Specifically, at 8:17 p.m. on Christmas Eve." He nodded to Grayson. Grayson hit the spacebar. On the big screen, the kitchen appeared. It was high definition, bright and clear. We saw the back of a woman in a gold dress. We saw a younger woman standing by the sink. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the laptop fan. Lorraine let out a gasp that sounded like a choke. She started to stand up. What is this? Turn it off." "Sit down, Lorraine," Arthur commanded. It wasn't a request. It was an order given with the full weight of his authority. "This is an invasion of privacy," she shrieked, looking at Mark. "Mark, do something. They were spying on us." "We are watching a security log in my client's home," Grayson said calmly. "It is perfectly legal, and I suggest you watch closely." Mark didn't move. He was staring at the screen, his mouth slightly open. The twins were frozen, their eyes wide. On the screen, the digital Lorraine blocked the door. The audio was crisp. "You are not going to ruin this night." I sat perfectly still, my hands clasped on the table to stop them from shaking. I didn't look at the screen. I lived it. I didn't need to watch it. Instead, I watched Lorraine. I watched the confident, grateful daughter-in-law crumble. I watched the realization hit her that she wasn't receiving an inheritance today. She was receiving a verdict. "It gets better," I said softly, speaking for the first time. "Wait for the part where you tell me I'm just a wallet." Lorraine turned to look at me. Her eyes filled with a mixture of terror and fury. But before she could speak, The sound of the slap on the video echoed through the dining room, a sharp, sickening crack that made everyone flinch. The trial had begun. The atmosphere in the dining room was brittle, like dried leaves ready to crumble under the slightest pressure. We were all seated. My father, Lorraine, the twins, myself, Grandpa Arthur, and Grayson Wells. The silence that followed the initial pleasantries was thick enough to choke on. Lorraine, however, seemed determined to pretend we were filming a holiday commercial. She reached across the table to straighten a napkin, her gold bracelets clinking softly. "It is just so wonderful to have everyone here," she beamed, turning her high-wattage smile toward Grayson. "You know, Mr. Wells, we really should do this more often, not just for legal business, but for family time. Kira works so hard in the city. We hardly ever see her, but she is such a dedicated daughter. Aren't you, sweetie?" She looked at me, her eyes daring me to contradict her. "I am here," I said simply. "And we appreciate it," Lorraine continued, glossing over my lack of enthusiasm. "We know how busy you are, but family comes first. That is what Mark and I always say. Right, Mark?" My father nodded, staring intently at his water glass. "Right." Arthur cleared his throat. The sound was low and authoritative, instantly cutting through Lorraine's chatter. "Mr. Salles is here to assist me with the final restructuring of my estate," Arthur announced. "We are here to sign papers that will determine the future ownership of this house and my remaining assets." Lorraine's eyes lit up. This was it. This was the moment she had been campaigning for. She sat up straighter, adopting a look of solemn responsibility. "Of course, Arthur," she said, her voice dropping to a respectful hush. "We are ready to take on that responsibility. Mark and I have already discussed some ideas for the property. Nothing major. Just some updates to the kitchen and maybe converting the study into a more modern guest suite. We want to make sure the house stays in the family for generations." She was already renovating. She was already erasing Grandpa from his own home while he sat at the head of the table. "Before we discuss the future," Arthur interrupted, his voice devoid of warmth, "I need to clarify the present. There is a condition for the transfer of my assets, a condition of character." "Character?" Lorraine laughed nervously. "Well, I think we have all shown our dedication. Mark has run the business. I have raised the children. We have been here every day." "Dedication is one thing," Arthur said. "Honesty is another. I need absolute transparency before I sign anything, which brings me to the matter of the kitchen camera." The smile froze on Lorraine's face. It didn't disappear. It just stopped moving, like a glitch in a video file. "The what?" she asked. "The camera in the kitchen," Arthur repeated, enunciating every syllable. "The one I installed last week. The one that was recording on Christmas Eve at 8:17 p.m. Lorraine's eyes darted to the side, looking at the blank television screen mounted on the wall, then back to Arthur. "I don't know what you're talking about. Is this a joke?" "Grayson," Arthur said. Grayson Wells hit the spacebar on his laptop. The large screen behind Arthur flickered to life. The audio was the first thing to hit us. The ambient hum of the refrigerator and the muffled sound of Jingle Bell Rock coming from the living room. Then, the image sharpened. It was the kitchen. It was undeniable. There was the island, there was the pile of dishes, and there was me, standing by the sink, looking tired and defensive. Lorraine appeared on screen. We watched the digital version of her close the door. We heard the click of the lock. It was loud in the silent dining room. "What is this?" Lorraine hissed, half rising from her chair. "Mark, make him stop. This is private." "Sit down," Mark whispered. It was the first time he had spoken, and his voice was trembling. He was staring at the screen, unable to look away. On the TV, the conversation played out. We heard Lorraine mock me about the inheritance. We heard her call me a wallet. We heard the venom in her voice as she called my mother unlovable. The twins, Leo and Maya, were staring at the television with their mouths open. They had never heard their mother speak like that. They only knew the public Lorraine, the one who baked cookies and volunteered at the school. This woman, the one snarling insults at her stepdaughter, was a stranger to them. And then came the violence. The slap was shocking, even though I knew it was coming, even though I had felt it. Seeing it on a 60-inch screen was different. It looked brutal. My head snapped back. The sound, a sharp, wet crack, echoed off the dining room walls. Then the shove. I went flying back into the counter. "Oh my God," Maya whispered, covering her mouth with her hands. On screen, Lorraine leaned over my fallen form. The camera's microphone picked up her whisper perfectly, amplifying it into a roar. "Don't ruin Christmas. Mày mà để ai biết chuyện này, cả nhà sẽ quay lưng với mày." Grayson paused the video. The image froze on Lorraine's face, twisted in a mask of pure malice, looming over me. The silence in the dining room was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, where all the oxygen had been sucked out. Lorraine sat there, her chest heaving. She looked around the table, her eyes wide and frantic. She saw the horror on Maya's face. She saw the shock on Leo's. She saw the utter defeat in Mark's posture. She realized she was cornered, and like any trapped animal, she attacked. "It's out of context," she shouted, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. "You don't understand. She provoked me. She was screaming at me. She was threatening to leave and make a scene in front of the guests. I was just trying to calm her down." "Calm her down?" Arthur asked, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "By striking her across the face? By throwing her into a cabinet?" "It was an accident," Lorraine cried, turning to Mark. "Mark, you know me. I would never hurt anyone. She slipped. I reached out to grab her and my hand slipped. The camera angle makes it look worse than it was." "We heard the sound." "Lorraine," Mark said. His voice was quiet, broken. He finally looked at her, and the look in his eyes wasn't love, it was revulsion. "We heard the slap. That wasn't a slip." "She has been manipulating you," Lorraine screamed, turning her fury on me. "Look at her, sitting there so smug. She planned this. She knew the camera was there. She goaded me into it so she could ruin us. This is a setup." She looked at the lawyer. "Mr. Wells, you can't use this. This is a private family matter. It has nothing to do with the estate. It is illegal to record someone without their consent." "Actually," Grayson Wells spoke up, his tone cool and clinical, "in the state of Colorado, video recording in one's own home for security purposes is entirely legal, and regarding the private matter, battery is a criminal offense. Mrs. Dalton, it ceases to be private the moment you break the law." Lorraine's mouth opened and closed. She looked at the twins. "Kids, don't look at that. It's fake. It's a deep fake. You know about those, right, Leo? Computers can do anything now." Leo looked at his mother. Then he looked at me. He looked at the faint yellow bruise that was still visible on my cheek under the dining room lights. "Kira's face is bruised." "Mom," Leo said quietly. Lorraine flinched as if he had slapped her. I took a deep breath. My hands were clasping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles were white, but my voice was steady. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I spoke with the cold precision of someone who had been holding back the truth for 15 years. "It wasn't a setup, Lorraine," I said. "And it wasn't the first time. It was just the first time you got caught." I looked at my father. "You want to know why I don't come home? You want to know why I work so much? It is because I pay for everything. I paid off her credit card debt 2 years ago. $5,000. I paid for Maya's trip to Italy. I paid for Leo's robotics camp. Every time she told you she saved money, she was taking it from me. And every time I came here, she told me I was cold, ungrateful, and unwanted." "Liar!" Lorraine shrieked. "She is a liar." "I have the bank transfers," I said calmly. "I have the emails. I have the text messages where you told me to keep my mouth shut or you would turn Dad against me." I turned back to Lorraine. "I didn't speak up because I was afraid. I was afraid of ruining the family. I was afraid of being the reason Dad was unhappy. I believed you when you said I was the problem." I paused, looking at the frozen image on the screen. But watching that, Seeing you hit me and then worry about your party, I realized something. I am not the one ruining this family." "Enough," Arthur said. He stood up. He was an old man, frail and battling cancer, but in that moment, he seemed 10 feet tall. "For years," Arthur said, looking down at Lorraine, "you have told me that Kira was the outsider. You told me she didn't care about us. You told me I should protect the family from her negativity." He pointed a trembling finger at the screen. "The person who destroys a family is not the one who tells the truth," Arthur declared, his voice booming. "The person who destroys a family is the one who uses violence to get their way and then demands silence to keep up appearances. You struck my granddaughter in my house. You threatened her. And you did it while eating my food and waiting for my money." "Dad, please," Lorraine whimpered, switching tactics to tears. "I was stressed. It was the holidays. I love this family. I love you." "You love my assets," Arthur corrected, "and you love your control." He turned to Grayson. "Mr. Wells, please explain the implications of this video regarding the estate." Grayson nodded. "Mrs. Dalton, this video is sufficient evidence to support a civil claim for damages and a restraining order. If Miss Dalton chooses to press charges, it is also evidence of assault. However, regarding the will, Arthur has included a specific clause. No beneficiary who has committed proven acts of violence or abuse against another family member may inherit." Lorraine's face went white. "You can't do that. I am his wife. I mean, Mark's wife." "I can," Arthur said. "And I have, as of this moment, you are disinherited. And frankly, Lorraine, I am debating whether to call the sheriff to have you escorted off my property for trespassing." The room was silent again, but the air had changed. The mask was gone. The perfect family lay in shards on the floor, smashed by the weight of the truth. Lorraine looked at Mark, desperate for a savior. "Mark," she pleaded, "say something. Are you going to let them do this to me?" All eyes turned to my father. He sat there, a broken man caught between the lie he had married and the daughter he had failed. He looked at the video screen one last time, then he looked at me. Mark started, his voice cracking. "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," I said softly. Mark closed his eyes, and a single tear leaked out. He didn't reach for Lorraine's hand. He pulled it away. That small gesture was the loudest sound in the room. The game was over. The silence that followed Mark pulling his hand away from Lorraine was heavy, final, and absolutely deafening. For the first time in my life, the air in the room didn't feel like it was pressing down on me. It felt like it was pressing down on her. The video on the screen had frozen on her snarling face, but the woman sitting across from me looked like a statue made of ash, crumbling under the weight of her own exposure. "Now," Grandpa Arthur said, his voice cutting through the tension like a razor. "You will sit there, Lorraine. You will be quiet, and you will listen to how things are going to be from this day forward." Lorraine opened her mouth to protest, her eyes darting to Mark, but my father refused to meet her gaze. He was staring at his hands. His shoulders slumped in a posture of utter defeat, finding no ally. Lorraine snapped her mouth shut, her jaw tight with suppressed rage. Arthur nodded to Grayson Wells. "Proceed, Mr. Wells." Grayson adjusted his glasses and opened the blue folder. "As of this morning, Arthur has executed a revocable living trust. The property at Silver Creek, the investment portfolio, and the primary savings accounts have all been transferred into this entity." "A trust?" Lorraine whispered, her voice trembling. "But Mark is the executor, right? That is what we agreed." "Mark is not the executor," Grayson said, not looking up from the paper. "Nor is he the trustee. The trust is designed to provide for Arthur's care for the remainder of his life. Every medical bill, every household expense, and every maintenance cost will be paid from this fund." He paused, looking directly at Lorraine. "The sole trustee, with full power of attorney and control over all disbursements, is Kira Dalton." The sound Lorraine made was a strangled gasp. She looked at me with eyes so wide they looked manic. "Her? You gave control of the money to her? She hates us. I gave control to the only person in this room who has never asked me for a dime, Arthur corrected calmly, and the only person who has proven she knows how to manage a budget without putting me into debt. This is insane. Lorraine stood up, her chair screeching against the floor. Mark, say something. She will starve us. She will kick us out. This is her revenge. Read the condition, Grayson, Arthur commanded. Grayson turned a page. The trust stipulates that upon Arthur's passing, or during his lifetime at the trustee's discretion, funds may be distributed to family members for education, housing, or health needs. However, there is a specific exclusion clause. He cleared his throat and read aloud, his voice devoid of emotion. Any beneficiary who is found to have engaged in physical assault, emotional coercion, blackmail, or gaslighting against the grantor or any other family member shall be permanently disinherited. Based on the video evidence reviewed today, Lorraine Dalton is named specifically as a disqualified party. Disqualified? Lorraine screamed. The veneer of the polite society wife was gone completely. She was frantic, cornered, and vicious. I have scrubbed your floors. I have cooked your meals for 15 years. I raised these children. And you are going to cut me out because of one bad night? Because of one video she engineered? She pointed a shaking finger at me. You did this, you little snake. You came here with your tart and your sad eyes, and you set me up. You want to take everything because you are jealous that I have a life, and you have nothing but a career. I sat there, watching her unravel. A week ago, her screaming would have made me shrink. It would have made me apologize. But today, with the truth displayed on the television and the trust deed on the table, her anger felt powerless. It was just noise. I didn't engineer anything, Lorraine, I said, my voice steady. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own actions. Mark! Lorraine grabbed my father's shoulder, shaking him. Are you seeing this? Your father is senile. He is letting this outsider steal our children's inheritance. Fight for us. Mark looked up then. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face pale. He looked at Lorraine, really looked at her, and then he looked at the frozen image of her on the screen, leaning over me with a face full of hate. I can't, Mark whispered. What do you mean you can't? She hissed. I can't defend you, Mark said, his voice gaining a little more volume. I knew you were hard on her. I knew you didn't like her. But I told myself it was just personality clashes. I told myself it was normal. He gestured helplessly at the screen. That isn't normal. Lorraine, you hit her. You hit my daughter. It was an accident. Stop lying, Mark shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The sudden outburst made everyone jump. Just stop lying. I am tired of the lies. I am tired of pretending we are happy. I am tired of asking Kira to fix everything and then letting you treat her like garbage. He turned to me, tears streaming down his face. Kira, I am so sorry. I should have stepped in years ago. I was weak. I just wanted peace. So I let you pay the price for it. I am sorry. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't erase 15 years of neglect. But it was the truth. And in that moment, that was all I needed. Thank you, Dad, I said softly. Lorraine looked around the room. She looked at Mark, who had turned away. She looked at the twins, who were huddled together, looking at their mother with fear and confusion. She looked at Arthur, who sat like a judge at the head of the table. Fine, she spat, her face twisting into a sneer. Fine, if you all want to side with her, go ahead. But don't expect me to stay here and be abused. I have rights. I have rights to this house. Actually, Arthur said, leaning forward, you don't. The house belongs to the trust. And as the grantor, I determine who lives here. If you feel you are being treated unfairly, you are free to leave. In fact, if you cannot abide by the rules of this house, which include not assaulting the other residents, then I insist upon it. He looked at Grayson. Mr. Wells has the eviction paperwork drafted. It is a simple matter to file it if you choose to make this difficult. Lorraine stood frozen. The threat was real. She had no leverage. Her husband had turned. Her manipulation had failed. The money was gone. Grayson Wells looked at me. Miss Dalton, regarding the video evidence, as the victim of the assault, it is your decision whether to forward this to the sheriff's department. A criminal filing would certainly expedite the restraining order and the removal of Mrs. Dalton from the premises. The room went silent again. The power had shifted completely to me. I held Lorraine's fate in my hands. I could send her to jail. I could humiliate her publicly in a way she could never recover from. I looked at Lorraine. She wasn't screaming anymore. She looked terrified. Then I looked at Maya and Leo. They were innocent in this. They were teenagers who were watching their world collapse. If I had their mother arrested on New Year's Day, that trauma would define the rest of their lives. I didn't want to be the villain in their story, even if it meant showing mercy to the villain in mine. No, I said, holding Grayson's gaze. I don't want to file charges. Lorraine let out a breath, her shoulders sagging. However, I continued, my voice hard, I want the video kept. I want it secure. And if she ever threatens me, or my father, or Grandpa, or the twins again, if she ever tries to rewrite history or gaslight anyone in this family, then I will file it, immediately. I looked at Lorraine. This is your one chance. You can walk away, or you can go to jail, but you will never control this family again. Lorraine looked at me with pure venom, but she knew she was beaten. She grabbed her purse from the table. She didn't look at Mark. She didn't say goodbye to the kids. She just turned and marched out of the dining room. We heard her heels clicking furiously on the hardwood floor. We heard the front door open and slam shut with a force that rattled the windows. A moment later, the sound of an engine roaring to life faded into the distance. She was gone. For a long time, no one moved. The silence this time wasn't heavy. It was hollow, like the air after a storm has finally passed. Arthur sighed, a long, rattling exhalation. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He looked tired, but he also looked lighter. Well, Arthur said, that is done. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a heavy iron key and a thick manila envelope. He slid them across the polished table toward me. The metal of the key scraped softly against the wood. The key to the safe, Arthur said, and the trust documents. You are in charge now, Kira. I reached out and put my hand over the key. It was cold and heavy. I don't want to control everyone, Grandpa, I said. That is what she did. I know, Arthur smiled faintly. That is why I gave it to you. You won't control. You will manage. You will protect. He looked at his son and his other grandchildren. From today on, you don't have to be silent to keep the peace. You have the authority to decide what we keep in this life and what we let go of. I picked up the key. It felt like an anchor, but in a good way. It was something solid in a world that had been slippery for so long. Okay, I said. I can do that. I stood up. I need a minute. Just some fresh air. Take your time, Mark said softly. We will be here. I walked out of the dining room, through the hallway that was still decorated with Lorraine's perfect Christmas garlands. They looked cheap now, just plastic and glitter. I opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch. The sun was beginning to set, casting long purple shadows across the snow. The air was biting cold, sharp and clean in my lungs. I walked to the edge of the railing and looked out at the driveway where my car was parked. Beyond it, the road stretched out, leading back to the highway, back to Denver, back to my life. I looked down at the key in my hand. For 15 years, I had been the girl who stood outside the window, looking in, desperate to be led into the warmth. I had begged for scraps of affection. I had paid for my seat at the table. I had taken the slap and the insults because I was terrified of being alone. But standing there in the cold, I realized I wasn't alone. I had Grandpa. I had the truth. And surprisingly, I had a family inside that was broken, yes, but finally honest. I closed my fingers around the key. The stinging in my cheek was gone. The voice in my head that whispered, "Don't ruin Christmas," was silent. I had ruined their perfect, fake Christmas, and in doing so, I had saved myself. I took a deep breath of the winter air, feeling it fill my chest. There would be lawyers, there would be divorce proceedings, there would be difficult conversations with Maya and Leo, but those were problems for tomorrow. Tonight, the house was quiet, the camera was watching, and I was the one holding the keys. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on whether you think I made the right choice by not pressing charges. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so more people can hear this story.